Gents, we'll stand for quiet prayer and get our uniforms in order. Okay, guys, take your seats. Um, First of all, I just hope you're all well. Strange times, I know, but hope you and all your families are okay, and make sure stay indoors. You know yourself the deal. So let's get into our first online lesson. Exciting, isn't it? So the first thing we're going to do is just have a look through the learning intentions of what we actually expect to get out of this class. And pretty much what we're going to be doing today is I'm going to go through some sample answers to the questions. We're going to correct our questions, and you can compare your own questions to my answers. Okay, so as we can see here, the learning intentions. Identify the PQE structure. We need to know the PQE structure so we can answer these questions to the best of our ability. Next up, we have compare your answers to the sample answers. So if you compare your answers to my answers and you have 2 words where I have a full paragraph, you know that more is expected of you. Now, I am obviously an adult, I'm an English teacher, my answers are going to be a little bit more advanced than yours, but you should be striving towards the same structure, maybe not the same vocabulary. Okay? Next up, you're going to select one area you're going to focus on for the chapter 4 questions. So I don't want you to think about too many different things, just focus on one aspect of the general feedback I'm going to give and use that as your focus. That's what I'm really going to focus on for chapter 4 for our next questions. Okay, so without further ado, we'll get into the lesson, and I'm actually just going to go through some general feedback first. So I had a look at some of your answers, and I'll just go through some general advice for feedback first. So the first things first, we know this, you need to include the keywords of the question in your answer. Okay, so if we look at the example of the first question here, what is the big difference between the greases and the socks? Immediately I say the big difference between the greases and the socks is. So I'm using the keywords of the question in my answer. That way I'm definitely sticking on topic. Next up, answer all parts of the question. Okay, so I'd have to pick a question with multiple parts. I don't think there are too many here. Oh yeah, what happens to Pony and Johnny in the vacant lot, and why is it a problem? So they fall asleep in the vacant lot, and this is an issue because Derry will be worried sick about Ponyboy, and then I go on to further explain that. So there's 2 different aspects of this question. What happens to Pony and Johnny in the vacant lot, and why is it a problem? If I just say what happens to Pony and Johnny in the vacant lot, I've missed out half the question, which means I've missed out on half the marks. So it's important to answer all parts of the question. Next up, include the PQE structure where necessary. So we know PQE is point, quote, and explain, and I'll be going through that in just a moment. But how will I know what's a PQE question and what's not? So generally, I will put in with reference to the text or explain your answer. And that will kind of signify or point out that this is a PQE answer. I'm looking for a quotation here. And generally, it's those longer questions. Okay? And the last one is fully explain your answers. So you have to ask yourself, well, why is this true? What does it mean for the characters? What does it mean for the question? And I'll go through that within the question just to help you out. All right? So let's have a look at the PQE structure. Point. Use the keywords of the question in your answer, make your point. So keywords of the question, as we've already said, and then make your point. Answer the question with that first sentence. That's your point. So it's not enough just to make a point. We need to show evidence. We need to prove our point. That's the big thing about these PQE questions. So in order to add some evidence, we need to have a quotation from the text. So we use a piece of the text to help to support your point. Think of it as your evidence, as we just said. We can't accuse someone of murder without evidence. And finally, explain. Finish your answer by fully explaining what this quote proves. So what is actually being said here? So I've actually highlighted them here and broken down my answer into PQE for my first question. So we're going to get straight into the question by question. I don't want this video to be crazy long, so we'll try and get through this quickly enough. So question number 1. What is the big difference between greasers and socks? The big difference between the socks and the greasers is that the greasers are too passionate while the socks are too apathetic, which basically just means that they don't care about anything. This can be seen when Cherry says, "You're emotional, we're sophisticated, cool to the point of not feeling anything." This lets us know that the greasers feel too much while the socks feel too little. So we can see that I've broken down my answer into the point. Socks feel too much, greasers feel too little. I have a quotation where Cherry Valance says exactly that. They're emotional, while the Socs are, they're unemotional, they're unmoved, they're passive, or even a good word for that is aloof, A-L-O-O-F, aloof, okay? Which means kind of distant or uncaring. So we've got our point, our quote, and our explain there. Now, moving on to the next question here. Ponyboy mentions a sunset in this chapter. What is the importance of this image? And this will be a major, major image for the rest of the novel. Okay, so this is an important one. We need to remember quotations around the sunset, and that as a key image for the text. So, I feel that the sunset in this chapter symbolizes the connection shared between Cherry and Soda. So, we saw the same sunset is my quotation. It lets readers know that while both the Socs and the Greasers may be at odds, they actually have more in common than they think. So it's, as we talked about in class, it's about that connection, that they're still people, they're still living in the same land, they still look up at the sky and see the same sunset, that they see the same stars, that they have more in common than what separates them. Okay? So again, I'll leave it up to you to pause here and break down this into P, Q, and E. What part is my P? What part is my Q? And what part is my E? Now, it's not the perfect answer, but it's decent. Question 3. How does Ponyboy describe Dari at the beginning of this chapter? At the beginning of this chapter, Ponyboy describes Dari as hard as a rock and about as human. This means that he feels Dari is a tough character that shows very little emotion. Now, this is an extremely short question, a short answer to this question, but it still has that P, Q, and E. How does he describe Dari? I say how he describes Dari with a quotation, and I explain what that quotation actually means. So short answer, but it's got all the right pieces of that answer. And I think that quotation is important for Dari as a character as well, or how Ponyboy perceives or looks at Dari, that he's hard as a rock and about as human. Question number 4. What tells us that Ponyboy is frustrated in this chapter? And I say that Ponyboy reveals his frustration when he barks at Johnny. Nice little metaphor there. He doesn't actually start barking. Ponyboy exclaims, "And you can shut your trap, Johnny Cade, because we all know you ain't wanted at home either." Which is extremely hurtful towards Johnny, of course. And under normal circumstances, Ponyboy would never say such a thing to his best friend, which shows that he was frustrated. So again, in my explanation, I'm explaining, what was said, why it was said, and why this shows. And most importantly, I'm coming back to the question here, and I'm using those keywords: frustrated, frustrated. Now, if you're a top-notch student, you won't use frustrated again. You'll use a synonym for frustrated, which, we can just go to dictionary.com, go to their sister website, thesaurus.com. And a thesaurus is not a dinosaur. A thesaurus is kind of like a dictionary, but it gives you similar words with a similar meaning. Okay, so we wanted frustrated, synonym for frustrated, and we get balked, crabbed, cramped, crimped, defeated, discontented, discouraged, disheartened. Embittered would probably be the most suitable one in this context. So, which shows that he was embittered. We could put in a load of different things there. We could say angry, anxious isn't great, but we could put it in there. So, if you're a really good student, seek to get keywords, but also synonyms for the keywords. And most of you are really good students, so try and do that. Question number 5. Do you think this world is a fair one? Why or why not? And I say, I do not. This is a personal response question. This is a great example of PQE question. It's asking me what I think and asking me to explain why. So I say that I do not believe that this world is a fair one because there are many injustices in the world. This is just many things that are unfair. And I have a quote here. As Ponyboy suggests, it ain't fair that we get all the rough breaks. Ponyboy and Johnny, through no fault of their own, are at a severe disadvantage in life due to their socio-economic status. And I put a little asterisk beside this because socio-economic status just means their financial and social status, which is basically how much money they have and how people view them. So we all have some kind of socioeconomic status, and that kind of determines how people view us a lot of the time. So 6. Why is Johnny so frightened when the blue Mustang appears? Simple question, requires a simple answer. Johnny is terrified when the blue Mustang appears because the owner of that very Mustang was the person to beat Johnny in the past. We know Bob with the blue Mustang and the rings cut up Johnny's face. Question 7. Why will Cherry not acknowledge Ponyboy if she sees him in school? Ouch. Cherry is going to ignore Ponyboy in school because, as Ponyboy admits, we aren't in the same class, meaning social class, not like classroom. She does not want to be judged by the other students for hanging around with someone of a perceived lower class. And by perceived here, I mean just what people view as a lower class. Okay? So she doesn't want to hang around with someone who's outside of her group, let's say. It's kind of like if you were to hang around with, a primary school student, people might look down on you because they're at a perceived lower status. So next up, in this scene, and we have lots of typos here, but look at, that's why they put rubbers on pencils. 8. In this scene, Johnny says, I can't take much more, and I'll kill myself or something. What would you say to Johnny in order to make him feel better? Now again, this is a personal question, so I have to use the word I here. I have to use I, me, my. And I said that I would tell Johnny, look Johnny, it's okay, we're in this thing together. We may not have Madras shirts or Mustangs, but we have the gang. We have each other, and I wouldn't trade places with those dirty, rotten socks if you paid me. So, of course, I just reassured Johnny that, of course, suicide is utterly preventable, that suicide is a permanent solution to an impermanent problem. Things do get better, and that's what I would say to Johnny. Question 9. What do Pony and Johnny see as the solution to their problems? So what Ponyboy views as the solution to his problem is moving to the country. So Ponyboy sees moving to the country as the solution to his problems. He says that, I love the country. I wanted to be out of towns and away from excitement. To show that he thinks if he changes where he lives, he would have a better chance at happiness. And in a way, I think life would be much simpler if he did or could make that change. So yeah, of course, a lot of his problems would melt away, but I'm sure more new problems would arrive. Question 10. What happens to Pony and Johnny in the vacant lot, and why is it a problem? We looked at this question already. So, Ponyboy and Johnny fall asleep in the vacant lot, and and this is an issue because Derry will be worried sick about Ponyboy. We know this is going to be a problem as Ponyboy admits that I ran home trembling at the thought of facing Derry. He knows he's made a mistake and will have to face the consequences when he gets home. Again, this is an example of a PQE answer, of course. Pause here and see if you can pick out what is the P, what is the Q, and what is the E. Okay, if you finish pausing and you've got that, let's go through it together. So, of course, as always, the first sentence or so is going to be the P. So I'm going to put that in yellow. We know this is going to be a problem as Ponyboy admits that I ran home trembling at the thought of Derry. So I have my quotation in that sentence. So of course that's going to be my Q. And then last but not least, I explain what that quotation means. He knows he's made a mistake and will have to face the consequences when he gets home. It's going to be trouble in the Curtis household. So you can see here, and this is always the way it's going to be. It's going to be P, then Q, then E. That is the structure I want you guys to follow. It's not Q, P, E. It's not E, Q, P. It's P, Q, E. I must have said that like 50 times in this video already, but it is that important. And it's going to carry on into Leaving Cert and beyond. So, why didn't Derry call the police? He should have just called the police and they would have went around and picked up Ponyboy and brought him home. Not quite. Derry couldn't call the police because if he did, he would seem like a poor guardian. Then Ponyboy and Soda Pop would be taken away by child services, effectively splitting their family forever. And I add a little bit, I fully explain my answer and I say, I think this is why Derry is so worried because he's trying his utmost to hold the family together. So yeah, tough job for Derry there. I think that's why he's so stressed. Next up, we know that Ponyboy runs away after being struck by Derry. after an outburst. So, do you think Ponyboy was right to run away? It's asking me, do you think? So I add, in my opinion, Ponyboy overreacted by running away. He and his brother were very emotional and things were said and done that were not meant. This is commonplace in family life. It happens all the time. Just as Cherry said earlier, the Greasers are emotionally charged people and often act on impulse. And this is exactly what Ponyboy did at this moment. He was emotional. He acted on the spur of the moment. We all do it. Question 13. At the end of the scene, Pony says things couldn't get any worse. I was wrong. Or sorry, he thought things couldn't get any worse, and he was wrong. So this is foreshadowing. We know what foreshadowing is. We remember from Romeo and Juliet. Foreshadowing is when we get a hint of what's to come in the future. It kind of builds suspense for us as readers. So let's have a look here. Predict what else might go wrong in the future of this novel. And now, lads, I'm going to be honest with you. I've read this novel number of times, so I know what was going to happen. So I tweaked my answer a little bit to come up with an alternate future. I think Ponyboy will try to stay away from his home and family for as long as possible, most likely becoming homeless around their native city of Tulsa, Oklahoma. I believe he will live off scraps and try to make away alone in the big city, coming into conflict with the Socs, and eventually having to face off against his big brother Derry to settle their conflict in a bloody rumble. That could be interesting. Maybe we should write that. So yeah, that's our walkthrough of the questions and answers. So what I want you guys to do is, of course, compare your answers to my answers, listen to this video, and just have a look. Am I doing the questions right? Am I doing the homework right? And also, we're going to go for chapter 4, and I'd like if those could be done for Thursday. If anyone has any issues, email me. You've got my email. Try to do them through OneNote if you can. And if not, you can do them in your copy and take a picture of them and email them on to me. And we'll get Teams up and running as well. I'll contact you through that also. Also, if you are flying ahead with this, I know a couple of people are. I don't mind if you work ahead with these questions. That's totally fine. What I would like for you to do is to either stay working on your oral presentation if you have already finished these questions. And I'd also like for you guys to get a book. I want you to get your own book, whatever it is, something that interests you. I know a lot of people like Skullduggery Pleasant, Harry Potter, you know, what's that series? Cherub series. A lot of people like. At the moment, I'm reading John Boyne's The Boy in the Striped Pajamas, and it is pretty good so far. I'm about 1/5 of the way through or so, and it's pretty good. It's an interesting book. A lot of historical context there. So I'd advise that one to you guys as well. But yeah, get a book. It will help you, especially in these times. Okay, and that's pretty much it, guys. I hope this helped. And as I said, if you have any issues, give me an email. Chapter 4 questions done for Thursday, hopefully, and then we'll move on to Chapter 5, and we'll get a Chapter 4 video up and running as well. All right, guys, take it easy, stay safe, and good luck.